Imagine this, a world wrapped in ice from pole to pole, oceans sealed under miles of frozen glass, the air razor sharp and cold enough to turn breath into crystal. The sun shines, but its warmth is powerless, bouncing back into space, leaving Earth in eternal twilight. This isn't a science fiction apocalypse. It really happened billions of years ago. Our planet, the same blue world we call home, nearly froze solid. Scientists call it Snowball Earth, a time when the planet came dangerously close to becoming a giant, lifeless ice sphere drifting through the void, and yet, somehow, life survived. This is the story of how the Earth almost died and how that catastrophe might have been the very reason we exist today. Let's rewind time not a few thousand years, not even millions. We're going back 700 million years, deep into the Proterozoic, an age before trees, before dinosaurs, before anything with bones or shells. Earth then was almost unrecognizable. The continents were bare and rocky, lifeless deserts under strange orange skies. The oceans were the cradle of life, but life itself was primitive, microscopic, invisible, fragile, and yet beneath those quiet waves, something extraordinary was brewing, a transformation that would shape the destiny of our planet. The air was thick with carbon dioxide, trapping heat and keeping the planet warm. But slowly, life began to change that balance. Tiny cyanobacteria, the first photosynthetic organisms, began releasing oxygen into the atmosphere, the start of what scientists call the Great Oxidation Event. This new oxygen was toxic to most early microbes, but it also set off a chain reaction that would cool the planet perhaps too much. It began subtly, a gradual global chill. Volcanoes slowed their carbon output. Weathering of rocks pulled carbon dioxide out of the air. And as greenhouse gases thinned, the planet's thermostat dropped. Ice began to spread. First around the poles, then down across the continents. White, reflective ice bounced sunlight back into space, cooling Earth even further, a feedback loop that spiraled out of control. Within centuries, perhaps just decades, the ice advanced faster than anything life had ever seen. Seas froze, glaciers merged. The equator itself glittered white. Earth became a snowball. Average temperatures may have plummeted to minus 50 degrees Celsius. Even the equatorial oceans froze hundreds of meters deep. A thin layer of liquid water, maybe just a few meters thick, might have survived beneath the ice, a secret refuge where life clung on in the shadows. If you could have seen it from space, Earth would have looked like a giant pearl, dazzling, cold, silent. No green, no blue, only endless white. The atmosphere was dry, the oceans sealed, and sunlight scattered weakly across an alien landscape. The wind howled across frozen plains of ice that stretched unbroken for thousands of miles. This was a planet on the edge of extinction. Most of Earth's early life disappeared. But somewhere, maybe near underwater volcanoes, or deep within cracks in the ice, life refused to die. In those isolated, oxygen-starved refuges, microscopic organisms adapted. They learned to survive on chemicals from the deep earth, sulfur, iron, and the faint warmth of hydrothermal vents, while the surface froze. The planet's heart kept beating. Far below the frozen crust, Earth's molten core still churned. Volcanoes continued to erupt, even as glaciers buried them. For millions of years they released carbon dioxide into the air, but it had nowhere to go. There were no rainstorms to wash it out, no plants to absorb it, no weather to recycle it. So it built up, slowly, invisibly. The atmosphere filled with greenhouse gases again. It took millions of years. But eventually the air grew thick enough to trap the sun's heat once more. And when the tipping point came, it came violently. Imagine ice melting across the entire world, oceans suddenly released, floods racing over continents, mega storms darkening the skies. The planet went from frozen tomb to fiery chaos. As the ice melted, it dumped minerals into the sea, feeding an explosion of life. Oxygen levels rose again. New ecosystems began to form complex, multicellular organisms, ancestors of plants and animals. This global rebirth might have set the stage for what came next, the Cambrian explosion, when life suddenly diversified into the ancestors of every living creature on Earth today. Out of the ashes, or rather, out of the ice came us. So, how do we know all this? How can scientists be sure that the entire planet once froze solid? The clues are written in rocks, layers of ancient sediments found even near the equator that show unmistakable signs of glacial activity. Drop stones, large rocks carried by icebergs, lie embedded in what were once tropical seafloors. Chemical fingerprints in those rocks reveal massive swings in oxygen and carbon levels. And when geologists matched those patterns across different continents, they realized the ice ages were global, not local. It was one of the greatest detective stories in Earth science, and when scientists coined the term Snowball Earth in the late 20th century, it reshaped our understanding of how fragile and how resilient our planet truly is. But perhaps the most amazing part isn't the ice, it's the survival. Somehow, amid a world of endless winter, life didn't vanish. It adapted. It evolved. It endured. Tiny pockets of warmth near underwater volcanic vents, under thin ice near the equator, or within salty brine channels may have sheltered early microbes, and when the planet finally thawed, those survivors spread across the world again, stronger, more complex, more prepared for the changing Earth. In a way, Snowball Earth acted like a cosmic filter, wiping the slate clean, forcing evolution to innovate. It tested life's limits, and life passed the test. Without that freeze, the rise of animals and eventually humans might never have happened. Snowball Earth isn't just ancient history, it's a warning and a lesson. Our planet has the power to swing from furnace to freezer, driven by delicate feedback loops in climate, atmosphere, and life itself. Back then, a small drop in greenhouse gases turned Earth into an ice prison. Today, an increase in those same gases threatens to tip it the other way into heat and chaos. The difference is that this time it's not volcanoes or microbes changing the balance. It's us. Understanding Snowball Earth reminds us that the climate system is not unbreakable. It's fragile, reactive, and capable of transformations that make or end entire ages. The ice of the past holds a mirror to the fire of the future. Even now, scientists are still debating, was Earth truly a complete snowball, or a slush ball with narrow belts of open water near the equator? No one knows for sure, but every year, new discoveries in geology and climate modeling bring us closer to understanding how a living planet could come so close to death and then be reborn. And perhaps that's the most haunting truth of all. The same forces that nearly killed Earth also gave it life. Volcanoes that warmed the frozen world released the carbon dioxide that fed plants. Ice that crushed continents carved new oceans and landscapes for life to colonize. Destruction became creation. Close your eyes and picture it again: the frozen world, the silence, the darkness, and then, slowly, a crack in the ice, a shimmer of blue, the first ray of sunlight touching open water in millions of years. That moment, the thawing of Snowball Earth, wasn't just a planetary event, it was a resurrection. The beginning of a new Earth. From that fragile rebirth came the continents we know, the air we breathe, and every living thing that ever walked, swam, or flew. Our world survived the impossible, and from that survival came us. Snowball Earth is more than a frozen chapter in history. It's a testament to the resilience of life, the balance of nature, and the breathtaking power of change. It reminds us that even when the planet seems doomed, when the odds are impossible, life finds a way. And every time you look at a snowflake or feel the chill of winter air, you're touching a memory, a whisper from that ancient, frozen world that almost ended everything. Because long before humans, long before dinosaurs, the Earth froze, nearly died, and began again. If you found this story of our planet's frozen past fascinating, hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep time mysteries and share this video with someone who loves exploring Earth's forgotten ages, from the Great Oxidation to the rise of life. We're uncovering the most dramatic chapters of our planet's story, one era at a time. Stay curious, stay inspired, and remember, the past of Earth is the mirror of our future. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture our planet, not the vibrant blue marble we know, but a ghostly white sphere drifting through space. A world so cold, even the oceans had turned to glass. A place where the sun rose and set over a frozen wasteland that stretched from one pole to the other. It sounds like science fiction, a planet locked in a deathly silence, frozen solid for millions of years. But this isn't fantasy. This is Earth's true story. Over 700 million years ago, our home world suffered its most brutal transformation. It wasn't an asteroid that ended life this time. It was the planet itself. A runaway chill spread across every continent, every ocean, every breath of air, until the Earth nearly froze to death. Scientists call this event Snowball Earth, a deep time catastrophe that pushed the planet to the edge of extinction, and somehow, against all odds, set the stage for life as we know it. To understand how our world could die of cold, we need to go back to a time when Earth looked nothing like it does now. The continents were fused into strange shapes, massive landmasses surrounded by endless seas. There were no forests, no animals, no birdsong. Just a barren, alien landscape under an orange sky. Life existed only in the ocean's fragile microbes, invisible to the naked eye. They floated in shallow seas, feeding on sunlight, iron, and chemical energy from the deep. But these tiny organisms were changing the world in ways they couldn't imagine. Through photosynthesis, they released oxygen into the atmosphere, a gas that was toxic to many early life forms but essential for the rise of future species. Oxygen transformed Earth's chemistry, stripping methane and carbon dioxide from the air, gases that once kept the planet warm. And when those greenhouse gases faded, the balance broke. The planet began to cool. At first, it was slow, so slow no creature could have noticed. Maybe a few cooler winters, a few more icy patches near the poles. But the change was relentless. The sun's warmth weakened as it reflected off bright ice. Less heat meant more ice, and more ice meant even less heat. Earth had triggered a runaway feedback loop, a self-reinforcing spiral of cold. Volcanoes had quieted, carbon dioxide was scarce, and the world began to lose its ability to trap warmth. Snow fell on continents that had never seen it before. Rivers slowed. The seas began to freeze. Within a few thousand years, a blink of an eye in geological time, glaciers stretched all the way to the equator. It was the dawn of the global ice age, the moment when the planet became a snowball from orbit. Earth would have gleamed like a frozen pearl, white, silent, and lifeless. The oceans were sealed under a lid of ice, perhaps a mile thick. The air was thin and dry. Winds screamed across endless glaciers, carrying snow that would never melt. Temperatures dropped to 50 C in places that were once tropical. The sunlight bounced off the white surface and escaped into space. Even the equator, normally the warmest part of the planet, became a landscape of frost and silence. It's hard to imagine anything surviving such conditions. But this was not the end of life, only its greatest test. Deep beneath the frozen crust, near cracks in the ice, life found refuge. Microbes clung to hydrothermal vents on the seafloor, where superheated water erupted from the planet's core. Others survived in tiny pockets of briny liquid trapped beneath the ice, or in volcanic pools where warmth still lingered. The surface of Earth was dead, but its heart was still beating, while the world above lay silent. The interior of Earth remained alive, restless, molten, and full of energy. Volcanoes erupted beneath the glaciers, releasing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the air. But with no rain, no plants, and no weather to cycle it out, that carbon slowly began to build up for millions of years. The planet's volcanoes continued this silent work, a slow accumulation of warmth in an endless winter, and then one day it was enough. The atmosphere thickened with greenhouse gases until the balance tipped again, this time in the opposite direction. The ice began to melt, the glaciers retreated, and the world woke up from its frozen nightmare. Imagine it, a planet frozen for tens of millions of years. Suddenly breaking apart, the sound of cracking ice thundered across continents. Floods raged as oceans burst through walls of melting glaciers. Volcanoes roared to life, painting the sky with fire and ash. It was chaos beautiful. Destructive, unstoppable chaos. As the ice melted, it released vast amounts of minerals into the ocean's iron, phosphorus, and nutrients trapped for eons. Microbes feasted, photosynthesis exploded, and oxygen flooded the seas and skies once again. This was not just the end of Snowball Earth, it was the beginning of something new, a rebirth within a few million years. Earth entered the Cambrian period, an age of evolutionary wonder when complex life, animals, plants, and ecosystems began to thrive for the first time. Out of death came diversity. Out of ice came life, but how do we know this actually happened? The evidence lies buried deep within Earth's oldest rocks. Geologists have discovered glacial deposits in places that were once near the equator, clear signs that ice once covered tropical regions. In some of these rocks are dropstones, large boulders carried by glaciers and dropped into marine sediments as the ice melted. Chemical fingerprints within those same layers reveal wild swings in carbon isotopes, matching exactly what we'd expect from a frozen planet followed by a massive greenhouse rebound. These clues tell a consistent story. Earth didn't just endure one snowball period, but possibly two or more, around 720 and 635 million years ago. Each one nearly ended life, but each one also sparked the next great evolutionary leap. The question is, why did this happen at all? What chain of events could push an entire planet into a deep freeze? Scientists believe several factors collided. The continents at that time were clustered near the equator, reflecting more sunlight. Weathering of rocks on those continents pulled carbon dioxide out of the air. At the same time, photosynthetic microbes were flooding the atmosphere with oxygen, which destroyed methane, a powerful greenhouse gas. Together, these changes weakened Earth's ability to trap heat. And once the first ice formed, the feedback loop took over, a spiral that no force on the surface could stop. It was nature's most dramatic example of cause and effect, a warning written in ice, showing how small changes can trigger planetary catastrophe. Snowball Earth is not just an ancient story, it's a mirror held up to our present. Back then, too little greenhouse gas froze the world. Today, too much threatens to overheat it. Both extremes remind us that the planet's climate system is fragile, responsive, and alive. It doesn't take much to tip the balance. If the ancient Earth could freeze solid because of microbial life altering its own atmosphere, imagine what modern humanity with industry, pollution, and massive carbon emissions is capable of doing in just a few centuries. The story of Snowball Earth isn't only about the past. It's about what happens when climate control slips beyond our reach. Despite everything, the frozen seas, the suffocating cold, the endless dark life endured, that fact alone is astonishing. It means that resilience is woven into the very fabric of Earth, even when the odds are impossible. Life finds a way. Without that endurance, without those few microbes surviving in the dark, none of us would be here. No forests, no oceans full of fish, no humans to tell the tale. Every living creature on Earth today carries the legacy of those microscopic survivors. Their determination became our inheritance. In the grand story of the universe, Earth's snowball episode is a moment of transformation, the day our planet nearly died, only to be reborn stronger than before. It teaches us that even destruction can sow the seeds of creation. It shows that endings and beginnings are part of the same cycle. The ice that once smothered the world carved the land we stand on today. The volcanoes that melted it filled the air we breathe. The extinction that seemed final opened the door to every species that would ever live. So next time you feel a cold winter wind on your face, remember, you're feeling a whisper from that ancient frozen world, a reminder that our planet has survived the impossible before. The Earth froze once. It might again. But for now, it endures. For hundreds of millions of years, Earth was a warm, tropical world. The seas shimmered in green and blue. Primitive algae thrived, pumping oxygen into the atmosphere. Volcanoes released carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas that trapped heat and kept the planet comfortable. Earth was stable until the balance was broken. You see, our planet runs on a delicate thermostat system scientists call the carbon cycle. When volcanoes erupt, they add carbon dioxide to the air. When it rains, that carbon mixes with water to form weak acids that break down rocks, locking the carbon away in the ocean. Too much the earth warms. Too little, it cools. For eons. This balance worked until a perfect storm of geological chaos flipped the switch. Around 750 million years ago, the supercontinent Rodinia began to crack apart. Massive rifts split through the land, tearing continents like bread. Volcanoes spewed lava for thousands of miles, raising mountain ranges and releasing gases that changed everything. At first, this volcanic activity added heat. But here's the twist, it also exposed fresh rock to the atmosphere. And fresh rock acts like a carbon vacuum, sucking out of the air through chemical weathering. So as Rodinia split, carbon dioxide levels plunged. Less meant less heat, and less heat meant the beginning of a planetary chill, but nature wasn't done. The continents now sat near the equator, reflecting more sunlight into space. Rain washed nutrients into the oceans, causing massive algal blooms. Those tiny organisms gobbled up even more carbon dioxide, pushing Earth's thermostat lower still. The planet began to cool, and cool, and cool. Once the first sheets of ice began to form, it was game over. Ice is like a mirror. It reflects sunlight instead of absorbing it. So the more ice spread, the less sunlight the Earth absorbed, and the colder it became. A runaway effect began, the ice albedo feedback loop. What started as patches of frost quickly grew into glaciers stretching from the poles toward the equator. Within a few thousand years, a blink in geological time, the oceans froze over, perhaps even to the equator. Winds died. Rain stopped. The once blue Earth turned white, a planet-sized snowball orbiting the sun, and in the darkness of that global winter, nearly everything that lived was pushed to the edge of extinction. Imagine standing on that frozen world. Above you, a sky so cold that even the air feels brittle. Beneath your feet, miles of solid ice covering the oceans. Temperatures dropping to 60°F, yet somehow, life endured. Tiny microorganisms, the ancestors of every plant and animal alive today, found refuge in the dark, liquid pockets beneath the ice. Near underwater volcanoes, where heat and minerals leaked from the Earth's crust, microbial life clung to existence. In these deep, hidden sanctuaries, life didn't just survive, it evolved. It learned to adapt, to feed on chemical energy instead of sunlight, and to resist extremes of cold and darkness. That resilience would one day give rise to everything: forests, fish, mammals, humans. In the heart of Earth's greatest freeze, evolution found its spark. For millions of years, the planet remained a frozen tomb. But below the ice, volcanoes never stopped. Eruptions continued to pour carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, gas that couldn't escape through the frozen oceans. Slowly, that built up like steam in a sealed pot. The greenhouse effect returned, and with it, the thaw. After tens of millions of years, the ice began to melt. Sunlight reflected again from open water. Rivers flowed. Clouds returned, and the Snowball Earth melted into a hothouse Earth. With global temperatures soaring, a dramatic rebirth that reshaped the planet forever. This wasn't just an end, it was a new beginning. The end of Snowball Earth set the stage for one of the most important Moments in history, the rise of complex life after the ice retreated. Oceans were filled with minerals and nutrients washed from the frozen lands. When sunlight returned, life exploded in diversity. Multicellular organisms appeared. Animals began to form. This was the world's first biological revolution, the prelude to the Cambrian explosion. When nearly all major life forms appeared. In other words, the same event that nearly ended life, gave birth to everything that came. After, you might think Snowball Earth is just a story of ancient ice, but it's a mirror of what's happening right now. It reminds us that our planet is fragile, that climate can shift from paradise to apocalypse with only small changes in chemistry and sunlight. It warns us that carbon, the same molecule that froze the world then, is now heating it up again, but it also gives hope, because Earth recovered. Life endured, and from the depths of its coldest moment, it rose stronger, more diverse, and more beautiful than ever before. So, next time you step outside and feel the warmth of the sun, remember this: there was once a time when that light barely reached us at all. When Earth was an endless winter and life was reduced to whispers beneath the ice. But even then, the spark never went out. It waited patiently for its chance to bloom again, and maybe that's the truest lesson of all. No matter how frozen the world may seem, there's always fire waiting beneath. For millions of years, Earth was entombed in a prison of ice. The oceans were sealed under frozen sheets stretching from pole to pole. The atmosphere was thin, dry, and quiet, the winds dead. Imagine a planet without seasons, without rain, without color. Even the sky would have looked different, pale and dim, filtered through layers of ice crystals. But below this frozen stillness, the planet was still alive. Deep under the crust, magma churned and boiled, continents drifted slowly, and volcanoes unseen beneath the ice rumbled with pressure. You can silence the surface, but you can't silence the fire at Earth's heart. For eons, volcanoes had been erupting, but their gases were trapped beneath the ice. Normally, when volcanoes erupt, they release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which warms the planet. But under a frozen lid, that couldn't escape. Instead, it built up, slowly and silently, turning Earth into a pressurized greenhouse waiting to explode. Think of it like this: you seal a boiling pot with a heavy lid. At first, nothing happens. Then pressure mounts. The lid rattles. Steam forces its way through every crack. That was Earth 635 million years ago. Every volcanic eruption released gases into the confined space between the crust and the ice sheets. Those gases, methane, sulfur, accumulated thicker and thicker over millions of years. And once the atmosphere reached a tipping point, the greenhouse effect took over. The planet began to heat. From within. At first, it was subtle, microscopic, melting beneath the ice, small pools of dark water absorbing sunlight. But levels kept climbing 1,000 times higher than today's atmosphere. Soon, the greenhouse effect became unstoppable. The fire fought back. Volcanoes erupted in waves, spewing ash and gas into the sky. Lava spread across glaciers, carving rivers of molten rock through walls of ice. Steam rose into the frigid air, turning the frozen silence into a boiling roar. And then, one day, the first major crack reached the ocean. Liquid water met molten rock and the planet hissed with fury. The oceans began to awaken. Dark blue patches opened across the white, growing wider each year. Sunlight, once deflected, was finally absorbed again. The more the planet melted, the faster it melted. The feedback loop reversed the ice albedo effect that once froze Earth, now thawed it in a runaway surge of warmth. As the ice melted, massive floods swept across the continents. Glaciers collapsed like walls of glass, releasing torrents that carved valleys and canyons. Oceans rose. Clouds formed for the first time in millions of years. Lightning crackled in the skies again, the sound of a planet returning to motion. Imagine standing on that reborn world. The air is thick with volcanic ash, the sky glows orange, and the ground trembles. You watch glaciers disintegrate as black rivers of lava cut through them like torches through wax. Steam, smoke, and mists whirl together, a dance of fire and ice. This was no gentle springtime. The great melt was violent, raw, and absolute. Temperatures skyrocketed from freezing to tropical in less than 1 million years. The ocean, once sealed in darkness, now boiled with chemical chaos. Minerals locked away by the ice, iron, phosphorus, calcium, flooded the seas, feeding microscopic life and setting the stage for a biological explosion. The planet was no longer a snowball. It was a greenhouse world, alive again when the ice melted. It wasn't just water that returned, it was possibility for millions of years. The frozen surface had prevented weathering, erosion, and circulation. When the thaw came, all those trapped minerals burst back into the oceans. The seas turned murky, rich with nutrients. Algae, cyanobacteria, and microbial life flourished like never before. Photosynthesis exploded, pumping oxygen into the atmosphere. The result: the second great oxidation event, which would later fuel the rise of complex multicellular life. The Great Melt wasn't just a geological event, it was a chemical revolution. It transformed the oceans into incubators of evolution. It took a world of frozen silence and turned it into a symphony of biology. Fire and ice are opposites, but in Earth's history, they've always worked together. The freezing wiped the slate clean. The melting wrote a new chapter. When the Snowball Earth ended, it didn't just melt ice, it melted limitations. It set the stage for the Ediacaran period, the dawn of complex organisms with soft bodies, strange shapes, and the first signs of coordinated movement. From those creatures came everything: fish, forests, dinosaurs. Humans. In a strange way, every heartbeat, every breath you take today is part of the rhythm that began when fire fought ice. Now, imagine if those volcanoes had never erupted. If the fire had stayed buried, if the carbon had remained locked beneath the crust. Earth might still be frozen, a silent dead marble drifting through space. No life, no oceans, no us. The Great Melt wasn't just an event. It was the most important comeback in planetary history. It was the moment when nature reminded the universe that life will always find a way. So what can this ancient story teach us today? It tells us that Earth is not fragile, it's fierce. It adapts, resets, transforms. But it also reminds us that balance matters. Just as too little carbon once froze the planet, too much could heat it beyond control. We're now, in our time, adjusting the same thermostat that controlled Snowball Earth, but this time, we're the ones turning the dial. The question is, will we learn from the fire and the ice? Or will history repeat itself in reverse? When the last glaciers melted, the Earth was unrecognizable. The continents were stripped bare, scoured clean by miles of ice that had bulldozed the surface. Everything that once lived near the surface was gone. The air was heavy with volcanic gases, and the oceans were chemical soups filled with iron and nutrients released by the thaw. But those barren lands and murky seas were a blank canvas waiting for something new. And nature, as it always does, began to paint. The meltwater carried minerals into the seas. Sunlight reached the waves again. And deep within those waters, where microbes had once clung to life beneath the ice, something extraordinary began to happen. A second genesis. Life began to bloom with a force never seen before. For millions of years, single-celled organisms ruled Earth, small, simple, invisible. But now, as oxygen flooded the atmosphere and nutrients enriched the oceans, those tiny cells started to cooperate, to connect, to form multicellular life. At first, they were fragile things, colonies of jelly-like creatures drifting through the water. But evolution had been waiting for this moment. The long freeze had been a test, a bottleneck that only the strongest and most adaptable survived. Now, freed from the ice, they evolved explosively. New body shapes appeared. Cells began to specialize, some for movement, some for feeding, some for defense. Life was experimenting, building, learning. This was the Ediacaran revolution, the dawn of creatures unlike anything before. The ocean that once slept beneath ice was now a glowing cradle of evolution. Picture the seafloor soft, dark, and quiet. Then, slowly, it comes alive. Strange, quilt-like creatures lie motionless, absorbing nutrients. Leaf-shaped beings sway gently, like fields of undersea grass. Circular forms with fractal limbs pulse softly in the current. These were the Ediacaran organisms, Earth's first true multicellular ecosystems. They had no bones, no eyes, no mouths, but they were pioneers. The first architects of complex life. It was the age before teeth. Before predators, a peaceful time when creatures simply grew and spread, turning the oceans into living tapestries. The earth, once frozen and sterile, was now teeming with mystery. All of this change was powered by a single, invisible force: oxygen. During the Snowball Earth thaw, volcanoes released enormous amounts of carbon dioxide, which triggered global warming. As the ice melted, photosynthetic organisms like algae and cyanobacteria flourished in the nutrient-rich oceans, producing vast quantities of oxygen for the first time in Earth's history. Oxygen reached high enough levels to support complex life. It was like the planet had learned to breathe again. This oxygen revolution didn't just give life energy, it gave it complexity. Cells could now build structures, grow larger, and perform new kinds of chemistry. It was this breath, this invisible transformation that turned the simple into the spectacular. Without it, there would be no animals, no forests, no humanity. The post-Snowball Earth era was a time of wild biological experimentation. Evolution went into overdrive, creating forms that defied imagination. Some creatures grew flat and wide to absorb sunlight efficiently. Others developed fibrous structures for support. Still others began to move, gliding slowly across the sea floor, leaving fossilized trails we can still see today. This was the world's first innovation boom, nature's Silicon Valley. Every shape, every pattern, every motion was a prototype. And from this explosion of biological creativity came the roots of all future life: symmetry, segmentation. Even the earliest forms of nervous systems. It was as if the planet itself had woken from a deep sleep and decided to reinvent everything. But evolution doesn't move without conflict. And soon, the peaceful Ediacaran seas gave rise to something new: competition. Some organisms grew faster, some grew larger, and some began to consume others. Predation, the act of one life feeding on another, entered the story. And once it did, evolution took off like wildfire. Creatures had to hide, move, sense, and defend. Muscles appeared, nerves evolved, shells began to form. The foundations of the animal kingdom of all complex behavior were laid in this great awakening. It was no longer just about surviving. It was about thriving. All of this, the ice, the melt, the oxygen, the innovation built to one inevitable climax: the Cambrian explosion. About 540 million years ago, the Cambrian explosion was the Big Bang of biology. In just a few million years, life diversified into nearly every major animal group: fish, arthropods, worms, mollusks, the ancestors of everything we know. But it couldn't have happened without the world that came before, without the rebirth after Snowball Earth. That thaw created the conditions: the oxygen, the competition, and the nutrients that made evolution possible. The Great Freeze nearly killed life. The Great Melt gave it wings. Think about it: a planet that was once silent and frozen now pulsed with rhythm and light. Every current, every ripple, every heartbeat in those new creatures echoed the same message: life adapts, life endures, life finds a way. From simple microbes came coral reefs. From drifting colonies came predators and prey. From frozen darkness came motion, awareness. and thought, and that is the miracle of this era, not just that Earth thawed, but that it learned how to live again. The story of life's rebirth after Snowball Earth isn't just ancient history, it's a reflection of our own time. It reminds us that even after total collapse, after extinction, after devastation, renewal is always possible. That nature's greatest creativity comes after its greatest crises. When Earth was frozen, it looked finished, but it was only preparing. Every trial was a reset, a chance for something more magnificent to rise. Maybe that's why the story feels so human. Because deep down, our species carries the same lesson written in its DNA. The world can fall apart and still come back stronger. When Earth froze solid over 650 million years ago, it wasn't just a disaster, it was a reset button. An apocalypse that, strangely enough, redesigned the planet for life. During those endless winters, the planet stripped itself bare chemically, physically, and biologically. Oceans froze. Continents cracked. Atmosphere changed. Every old ecosystem was erased, every weakness tested, every survivor refined, and when the ice finally melted, the survivors weren't the same. They were tougher, more adaptable, more creative. It was as if evolution had been sharpened by the cold snowball. Earth was nature's brutal training ground, and what came out of it was stronger than anything before. That is the first part of its legacy, the reset that made complex life possible. It's easy to think of life as fragile, but the truth is, life is forged in fire and ice. Every species alive today owes its resilience to those early survivors that learned to adapt when the world turned against them. Deep under the ice, microbes learned to live without sunlight, feeding on chemicals from underwater volcanoes. They learned to tolerate toxic gases, low oxygen, and freezing darkness. Those same genetic survival strategies are still inside us, literally encoded in our DNA, our cells, our energy systems. Even our metabolism, all traced back to those microbes that endured Snowball Earth. The event changed not just the landscape, but the very design of life, and that's the second part of its legacy. Adaptation as evolution's greatest weapon. When the thaw came, Earth's oceans became a cosmic laboratory. The meltwater from retreating glaciers flooded the seas with minerals, iron, phosphorus, calcium, nutrients life had never had in such abundance. Imagine the oceans glowing green with algae blooms stretching from horizon to horizon. Those blooms pumped oxygen into the sky, transforming Earth's atmosphere into the breathable air we depend on today. Before the freeze, oxygen was a rare luxury. After it, it became the foundation of everything, and with oxygen came complexity, cells that could burn energy efficiently, grow larger, and form tissues and organs. This chemical revolution lit the fuse that led to the Cambrian explosion and the diversity of life we see now. Without Snowball Earth, there would be no fish, no mammals, no humans. The frozen world was not the end, it was the beginning of the oxygen world. That's the third legacy. Snowball Earth transformed the oceans into engines of life. You might not think of ice as intelligent, but in a strange way. Earth learned something during its global freeze. It learned how to regulate its own temperature. Before the snowball, carbon dioxide levels could swing wildly. Volcanoes could heat the planet uncontrollably, and weathering could cool it to deadly levels. But after the great freeze and melt, new feedback systems formed. The climate's natural thermostat became more stable. Rocks, oceans, and plants began to work together to store carbon and release it slowly, balancing the atmosphere over geological time. It's the reason we have had hundreds of millions of years of relatively stable climate since Snowball Earth taught the planet how to breathe, how to keep itself alive. That's the fourth legacy. Climate balance born from chaos. Every major step in life's journey traces back to that icy crucible. When the snowball melted, it didn't just give rise to new life, it gave rise to thinking life. The first complex organisms evolved in the post-snowball seas. From them came animals, from animals came intelligence, and from intelligence came us humans, capable of reflection, memory, and imagination. So, in a profound sense, the snowball didn't just reshape Earth. It shaped consciousness itself, our ability to wonder about the stars, to explore our origins, to make art, to tell stories. All of it began in a world that had once been silent under ice, without that trial of fire and frost. There would be no us to ask the question, why? That's the fifth legacy. From extinction came awareness. Even today we carry the memory of Snowball Earth inside us in our biology. Our cells can switch to low energy survival modes, just like ancient microbes did under ice. Our blood carries iron, a mineral that once flooded the oceans when glaciers melted. Our dependence on oxygen, our tolerance to cold, our use of carbon, all are ancient echoes of a time when survival meant adaptation to extremes. The snowball didn't just shape the world outside us, it wrote itself into the code of life, and because of that, we are living fossils of Earth's greatest transformation. Earth has frozen again since then, though never as completely. But the scars of Snowball Earth are still written across its rocks, dropstones in Namibia and Australia, left by glaciers that reached the equator, layers of carbonate rock, formed when the world suddenly thawed, fossilized chemical traces of oxygen surging after the melt. These are the fingerprints of the apocalypse that gave birth to everything. When scientists study them, they're not just studying ice, they're studying the birth certificate of life, and every discovery whispers the same truth. Earth remembers. Snowball Earth isn't just a story of the past, it's a warning for the present. Because today humanity is changing the planet's thermostat again, only this time in the opposite direction. We're releasing carbon faster than any volcano ever did. We're warming the planet in decades, not millennia, but the lesson of Snowball Earth isn't just about catastrophe, it's about resilience. The planet recovered before. Life adapted before. But this time, we're the ones in control. The legacy of Snowball Earth tells us two things. The Earth will survive, but whether we survive with it depends on what we do next, even in its darkest stage. Earth never gave up. When sunlight disappeared and ice stretched from pole to pole, life still found a way in deep sea vents, under cracks of ice, in the warmth of volcanic rocks. Those sparks of persistence are the same ones that drive us now through our own modern challenges. That's the ultimate legacy of Snowball Earth, hope, because even when everything freezes, when progress stops, when all seems lost, the story isn't over. The thaw always comes. The fire always returns. So when you look up at the sky, when you feel the sun on your face or the wind on your skin, remember this, that warmth was once gone. That light was once dimmed. And yet, here we are, children of the thaw, born from ice and flame. Snowball Earth nearly ended everything. But instead, it created everything. It taught life to endure. It taught the planet to balance. It gave birth to oceans, oxygen, evolution, and eventually us. Maybe the question isn't, why did Earth freeze? Maybe it's, what did the freeze teach us? That even in the coldest moments of history, when the world seems silent and everything beautiful seems gone, the next great chapter is already forming beneath the ice. This was Snowball Earth, the catastrophe that gave birth to life.